And we're here.
Hello,
Episode
hello.
1 for the Writers Guild podcast, a podcast in which we talk about writing, but not necessarily guilds.
Yeah, might come up.
Yeah,
Who
maybe,
knows?
you got to have a plan for the future. I don't know what I'm saying. I'm rambling.
Hey, guilds are cool, man. Assassin's Guild, Merchants Guild.
Yeah, so the way we're going to do this, like at least the idea I had initially, harping back to a previous conversation we had regarding the Weekly Planet podcast. They had a fan comment on their channel asking like, "Hey, how do you know you structure a podcast?" And their response was like, "You could just do what you want." So point being, we had in mind this initial structure, and we'll see how it pans out. But this the first idea we had for episode 1 was like, okay, so we start with a question, and one person picks the question, and we alternate each week, and that person would direct the question at the other. The other answers that question, and then the person who initially asked the question then answers it. In this case, I'm of the understanding that you prepared a question. Maybe not. Or did you?
I did. So,
Yes.
kind of got a choice. Do you want pop culture question or do you want more philosophical question?
Dude, just throw the pop culture one at me. I'm really curious about that one,
Let's get you.
strangely enough.
All right. All right. Which Superman do you like better? Henry Cavill. Wow, sorry. Yeah, we're starting a fantasy podcast and I can't even pronounce
No,
his
I
name.
got you. I got you. Yeah.
And
I've done the
then,
same thing.
or the new like James Gunn Superman, let's call him, and why?
I'm actually so happy this is the question you asked. When you said pop culture versus philosophy, I was like, man, there's such a high chance you're going to harp on something in pop culture in which I have a gaping hole of knowledge. This I'm actually really excited about because I watched, because
Amazing.
we were going to watch the Superman movie that one night.
We
I
were.
I ended up like getting really curious about the movie because I was hearing good things about it, and so I watched it. Dude, I loved the new Superman movie. I
Tell
love
me about it. Okay.
easy that the answer to your the first part of your question. The answer is an easy. Oh, the new guy. I forget his name.
I know. I always say James Gunn Superman. It's like, oh, he has a
Yeah,
name too.
yeah. Well, I'm not familiar with the actor, but there's something to be said about that. First and foremost, I'm a big fan of unknowns being cast. Not universally so. It is fun to like see a Mission Impossible movie and you got Tom Cruise in there, and come on, it's Tom Cruise. He's
Doesn't
crazy and
age.
he hangs off buildings and planes and stuff. But with an unknown, like an actor that you've seen in too many places too often, like Jack Black, you'll see him as Jack Black because you're just too familiar with the person behind the persona. But if you cast an unknown, it allows them to just embody the character without you having necessarily any knowledge of who they are. And I think that can make for a more convincing performance, especially when they're cast with having like how well do they match the character in mind as opposed to like how famous are they? Because I think Jack Black is getting some flack these days. I don't think it's any of his fault. It's just the studios keep casting him in movies for roles that he doesn't really fit. You know. That being said, I love the casting of Unknown because it's a guy who just looks like and can act like Superman, and like I've never seen him anywhere else. So like I don't know any different. He nailed it. I love that. So my problem with the Henry Cavill Superman, this is not an attack on Henry Cavill as a person, though I will say he's not a good actor. People pitch a fit when I say
Oh,
that. He
we're
he's
gonna have to
a
argue about that.
Oh, really? He's a
Oh yeah.
good-looking guy with the personality of a doorpost.
Dalton,
Super.
blasphemy.
Yeah, I know. Is the thing, dude? People are crazy about him because he's good-looking and he looks the part, but he's not really that good of an actor. He's fine. He's like I would say he's like Arnold Schwarzenegger level. Like he can do it, but
Mm.
he's no Sir Patrick Stewart.
I
Also,
think we have a new topic of the podcast right here, man.
okay. Well, let me like run through this, and then you can give your response. Okay, so
Yeah, finish your
basically,
thought.
there was two big reasons with the DC universe or their initial attempt with it. It was really dark and gritty at first because like you had the Dark Knight trilogy that people loved. That was dark and gritty, so like that worked. And there was this natural desire to not follow the MCU trend of peppy and fun and quippy, which was good, but they did it with kind of a disregard for like how that impacted character to character. Like Dark and Gritty works for Batman because as a child he watched someone shoot his parents in an alleyway, and yeah, that's pretty dark and sinister, and that would you know, that would create a man that was kind of naturally dark and gritty. Whereas Superman's supposed to be inspiring. He's the superhero we want to be, you know.
Hope.
Yeah, he's inspiring. Like when I saw the Superman movie, it was very inspiring. He's got the power physically to win the day, but he also has the character, and I found it very touching. I thought it was great. But with the Henry Cavill Superman, it's all dark and gritty, and he snaps a guy's neck at the end, and he's like, "Oh!" And it's like, that's not Superman. He doesn't fail his moral standards. People had a similar issue with the end of Avatar, The Last Airbender. I don't know if you watched the end of that show, but there's a similar conundrum with the finale of that show that I had no issue with. I actually thought that ended well, but I understood people's reasoning. The reasoning being a character having to like, you know, kind of violate a moral standard that they had. Like Superman doesn't kill people. And then backtracking on that because it's dark and gritty. Like that's not Superman, you know? So easily goes to the actor depicted in the recent James Gunn movie. So there's my answer.
Wow.
What is your take?
Okay. No, that was like, that was point blank. Like you had no hesitation there. So
I was ready.
Incredible. I got to admit, I did not expect that.
Oh, really?
I would have thought you'd be a big Henry Cavill fan.
Nope, never.
First off, you look similar to him. So there you go.
You. Okay,
like,
I'll pretend that's true.
But I just in general think that like Henry Cavill, he has such a respect for, he really knows the lore behind these stories that he's acting in, like The Witcher, straight up to the point where he's getting in an argument with the director over creative differences, and he's saying, hey, no, this is not how the character would actually act. Or
my respect.
Superman, I know that he did not like the take on Superman. I think you brought up a really good point where it was, that's not what Superman is. He's hope, he's light, he's kind of the Boy Scout, right? But I say that in an endearing way.
Absolutely.
I in Henry Cavill's defense, because we're not gonna, that'll be another topic at some point. But you should watch Gentlemanly, oh goodness, I'm blanking on it, but it's Gentlemanly Warfare or something like that. And it's, yes, the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. And it's Henry Cavill and Alan Richardson, and like just it's crazy. But the range there is, there's a lot more range there than you typically see from him. So that's all I'll say in his defense. What quick follow-up question, because I know this isn't our main topic, but that's okay. What did you think about speaking of Superman and all that he is, what did you think about the more like vulnerable side of him that James Gunn was tapping into, where it was like, you know, pretty much he's getting beat up the whole first half of the movie?
Oh, dude, I thought it was awesome. Okay, so I'm going to make a pop culture reference that I do not at all expect you to know anything about, but there's a show I really got into in middle school, so it's kind of like a core memory. It's embedded in my heart. I love it as an adult. You know, it just got grandfathered in. That would be Dragon Ball Z. That's a fictitious universe where people have cosmic levels of power. They're not unlike Superman, flying across the sky like missiles and, you know, knocking the crap out of each other, flying through buildings. Same as Superman stuff, but actually more nutty because it's anime. And so that opening scene where we can talk about this. This isn't a spoiler because it's like the very opening of the movie. Superman just falls out of the sky and just boom,
right,
like a
I did not
meteorite.
expect it.
I love that just because it kind of tapped into that like hyper superhuman element that Dragon Ball Z is so representative of people. Like you can get punched and you go flying across the planet, and then you land on the ground. You go, oh, like I just think that's fun.
Right.
That being said, I'm not a comic book guy, so I know when I make critiques of characters as they're depicted in movies, like the diehard fans kind of like come after me because I'm making comments in ignorance. So that being said, usually, having grown up in the Henry Cavill era of Superman, I've always had the impression of Superman kind of just being boring because he doesn't have any vulnerabilities outside of, well, I guess it has to be kryptonite, right?
I would agree.
And
Yeah.
I always much more preferred like Batman because
Oh,
Batman struggles and he outsmarts his opponents, at least as he's depicted in the Dark Knight trilogy, and I really like that.
mhm.
I like that more human approach. So he never really interested me on account of that. Turns out I just wasn't getting a faithful depiction of his character because when we had him, yeah, again, optimistic, inspiring depiction of the character, that's great and all. But like he was getting the tar beaten out of him. That's fun because you want to see a character struggle. I think that's a big reason, or a big part, obviously a lot of things, but I think a big part of what made Indiana Jones such a endearing character was not just that he prevailed, but that he prevailed in the face of so much struggle. Like at the end of all of his movies, his clothes are shred to ribbons and plastered with sweat, and he can barely stand, and that's awesome. I mean, it's relatable. So I liked watching Superman struggle because that's more fun.
Yeah.
And if I'm to like read into it and to try to give like a deeper answer, I'd say it makes it more meaningful when he did win because he had to work for it. If he just got it, that'd feel cheap, you know?
There was tension and stakes, and I think that's really important and missing from a lot of that. That's where the MCU is going wrong, is because once they introduced the multiverse and time travel, you lost the sense of stakes.
Yes.
And so with Superman, it's like, well, if he's invincible, there's never really any stakes. So that's why I did like how James Gunn was kind of, and two, I think Luthor is one of the most interesting villains. I think he's a very underrated villain.
Mhm.
Like if you really dive into like just a super genius human who's
Yeah.
trying to take down a superhuman, it's a cool dynamic. I really like that because you would think that he's kind of out of his league, but he's so smart that he finds these creative ways to try and take down Super. I don't know. I do appreciate all that side of it. One quick note too on the Indiana Jones point is recently there was an article that was looking into why modern shows appear kind of cheesy, and like if you look at it looks like they're wearing costumes and
Oh yeah.
everything's kind of spotless, like Rings of Power, for instance. It looks like they just threw on some Halloween costumes, and it looks a lot cheaper than like the original Lord of the Rings because there's not that grime and rips and like the Indiana Jones type of look,
Yeah.
right, at the end of the movie. So
Absolutely.
that's something I've been paying attention to more recently. But
Oh, dude, that's an absolutely great point. Oh man, you strike a raw nerve there with Rings of Power.
that's a
Is there
topic
is
for
there any?
another episode.
Yeah. Well, shall I go ahead and get us into the topic of the day?
Let's do it, man.
Okay, so following the format, it's going to be a reverse of the question where I just throw the topic at you and you have to initiate it. And I went for you kind of gave a very specific, awesome question there. I had a broad brush approach for the topic,
Ooh, love it.
which is actually perfect because you referenced this right before we started this episode. So I know it's on your mind. Today's topic is about characters. And I know what I
Yes.
want to say about characters because this is something very near and dear to my heart. But you start it.
All right. Yeah, man. You looked at my topic wish list and were like, what's number one?
There you go.
I Character building, I think in the past, like with my trilogies, for those of you who don't know, um, I self-published a trilogy, and characters, I think I wrote some well-crafted characters, but it wasn't a thought that like, oh, what do I want this character to say? What do I want to put into them? And what I'm doing more so with my writing nowadays is trying to start with the character building and then crafting the world around them, because I think that as long as you have incredibly powerful characters,
Yeah.
and I think that's what a lot of modern content, like media content, whether that's like TV shows or books or
Mhm.
whatever, is that the characters are lacking, and a lot of times are either very stereotypical or like leaning into tropes too much.
Mhm.
And I know that there are a few things that I want to say with my story. So I've been looking at the characters more so as devices, and by that I just mean that I'm trying to be intentional with
Yeah.
who I'm writing. And what's really interesting for me with my newest work that I've been writing is it's first person POV present tense, and so I'm really inside the mind of my character,
Okay.
and I'm pretty stoked about. I've only written a few chapters of this book, but pretty stoked about just. I feel as though I'll be able to lean into my own takes on the world and feelings and contextualizing life and whatnot. So I'm pretty excited about it. I think there's a lot I could dive into there, but
There you go.
characters are so important, and I think if you nail the right character and do it well, it doesn't really matter what world they're in. It's going to be a great story. Whereas if you nail the world, but the characters are pretty flat or 2D, just boring,
Yeah.
then it's not necessarily guaranteed you've got a story there. And so that's why, again, I'm putting so much more emphasis on my characters, and I would say the word is deliberate.
Yeah.
And I'm starting with first person POV, one character, trying to nail them. And then maybe at some point in life, I'll get really good and to the point I can write third person POV, have a bunch of different characters and motivations, but baby steps.
I actually really like that you're disciplining yourself to lock in to first person after having, you really spread your wings with your self-published. Kaysen is a self-published author of no less than 3 books, an entire fantasy trilogy, actually.
Colors of the Mayhem. Look them up.
Yeah.
Shout out.
In those, shut up. in those books, you had a broad spectrum of characters, and visited all of their perspectives throughout the story. And I love writing that way, and I have no intention of altering that because ultimately in my case, I like, to be totally frank, I like writing in a sort of cinematic style. I think that's naturally a consequence of having grown up with movies. My style of writing always kind of leans toward a kind of film-like format.
And I picked up on that when I read one of your drafts. Like you do have this very in a complimentary way. It was really cool. It's cinematic.
I appreciate that. Yeah, so I love dancing between characters. Like I love the kind of Michael Crichton approach of Jurassic Park. Like if Jurassic Park, that book doesn't really have. You could say Alan Grant's the main character, but kind of. He's not really the main character. It's more of like, here's a cast of characters. You could have an entire chapter dedicated to this one guy, and then the next chapter and the chapter after that, all the way to the end of the book, you don't see him again. And then in that case, he was like a device, like kind of calling back to what you were talking about. That's kind of cinematic, where you'll be introduced to a character who serves a very specific function for the plot, and then you'll go on. And then from there, you'll be juggling scenes between a whole cast of characters. That's exactly what the book Jurassic Park is like. I really enjoy that. So to anyway, I'm rambling, but to discipline yourself to anchor to one character. I'm going to tell this entire story from this one perspective. That sounds like a lot of discipline. So I guess I'll follow up with a question for you. Have there been any, if there have been, has there been any challenges you've had come up as you've told your story where oh man, I can't really tell it that way because I can't change perspectives? And if so, how have you countered that? Or at least what has it been like shifting to a dedicated perspective?
That's a great question. So there have been, and the advantage of third person POV is you can typically you have kind of a primary character for the chapter, but you're not inside their head, and so you can sort of, or the way I wrote my books, there's a word for it, but I had the narrator, so I was omniscient
Yeah.
view or whatever,
Yeah.
where I could kind of sometimes provide a little more context. And right now, what's interesting is just seeing specifically through the eyes and hearing through the ears of this one character.
Hmm.
So I've had to be a little more crafty with how I'm revealing things and how like for instance, instead of saying, okay, he's in it has really challenged me to show, not tell, which you're always hearing, right? From grammar teachers and English teachers, all that. They're
Oh, I
always
got a
like,
bone to
show,
pick with
don't
that one.
tell. Well,
Yeah. I'm sorry. No, no. I'll mention it later.
so
You keep going.
so in this case, also I apologize. I've been fighting a cough for a week and a half, everyone. I apologize. But
You could be.
yeah, so in this case, it was interesting because I wanted to tell, hey, he's got a code of honor and a sense of justice, even though he is effectively a warlord. So instead of telling that, because again, it's his point of view, it'd be weird if it was like, oh, I abide by like blah, 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 blah. What ends up happening is two of his soldiers break the code, go into a house to essentially like rape or pillage, and he kills one of them, or he drags them both out of the house and then kills them outside the house, so
That's
as not
brutal.
to sully the floors with their blood. Yeah, because they had just overtaken the city, by the way. And anyway,
Mm.
so yeah, he's a very brutal character for sure, but he does kind of have these moral guidelines, and it's a little bit gray. It's like, okay, you're willing to just kill your soldiers and punish them in that sense for breaking breaking orders or breaking the law, but he's also saving the city they just the citizens of the city they just conquered. And so he's kind of it's kind of interesting in that sense, where I'm trying to show that all of those things, right? So that's been a challenge recently, is trying to show who he is and less tell.
Yeah.
And one other thing I would just add is voices. Like a challenge I heard a great author, I forget who, but they said that write every character's sentence. Like if somebody reads the book, they should know who's speaking based on the sentence, instead of just Kaysen said or Belton said.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You have a way of talking, and it's a cool challenge, right? Like it doesn't always work because it's like some sentences are one word, but you know what I mean? Where like you get the gist of it, right?
Yeah.
Where
Yeah. You
each
make
person
them.
has a
Yeah.
distinguished voice. So
Yeah, dude.
Yeah.
Kind of on the topic of characters, kind of branching off of my own thought on the topic. Characters are I want to say they're the most important part in writing a story for me, because the way I've always looked at it is like they are the most important part of the story. And my argument for that is that first and foremost, of all the things that are, that make up a book, what we relate to are people, because we're people, we're humans. So if you have a captivating, engaging character on the page, I really don't think it matters what your story's about. If that character is captivating, you're going to get people on board with whatever ideas you have behind that story. So like, obviously we want to write stories, depicting ideas and concepts that we're passionate about. Like my story is really just the inner 9-year-old fantasy that I wanted to capture on the page. That was always what it was about. But as you learn to write, you realize, oh, if I want to make that work, if there's going to be like, let's say there's going to be a threat and it needs to come off as threatening, well, then that needs to come at a cost. And then in turn, characters need to react realistically. They need to be scared. But which forces you to really think about how would a person respond in this situation? And I think of a movie like Edge of Tomorrow. I did mention this to you the other day, but I'm bringing it up again because it's such a good example. It's a totally ridiculous kind of paint by numbers sci-fi action film. I don't care. I love it because it has a realistic depiction, I think, of a person's reaction to an extraordinary situation. Like Tom Cruise's character does not know what's going on. Early on in the movie, he dies and he wakes up at the beginning of the day and he's just bewildered, and he's reliving the whole day all over again. Everyone's saying the same things they did before, and he's speechless. He's just standing there with his mouth agape, just this glassy stare, like he just can't understand.
I can tell you're a writer because you said mouth agape.
Oh yeah,
his mouth open. But yeah,
yeah,
that's good stuff.
And it's so freaking good. I love that kind of stuff where it doesn't matter how extraordinary or crazy the concept is that you're depicting. The character's grounded. I mean, that's just so important. So I'm not going to pretend like I absolutely know how to do that, because the truth is you gun for that. You try to make that as good as you can, and then maybe somebody reads a draft and then they say, hey, that doesn't look realistic. Like maybe you could like reel back there. It's a process. It's not unlike stand up. A stand up might be somebody who has immense potential, who might be very, very funny, but they still need to go on a stage and say jokes and have people stare at them like, that sucked. And they go, oh crap. And then they work through their head. Wait, what went wrong? And then they figure it out. Yeah. And it's no different from that. So.
Like, yeah. And you're speaking in the actual process of writing, as you're writing a character in any given scene, you may get their actions or words wrong. Is that what you mean? And then like rewriting that scene based on who that character is?
Yeah, so I'll give an example. In the first act of my book, at least with the current draft I'm working on, and I don't see this changing because I like it, but this is like an example of me needing to fine-tune the behaviors of the characters to make them a little more believable. There's a couple of characters, they're traveling through the desert, and the context is them escaping. They know there's the way I present it is that neither of them is actually particularly concerned about this threat, but nonetheless, there is a real possibility of somebody coming after them. And there's a chapter, which you need to have chapters like this, in which nothing necessarily happens plot-wise, but the characters are talking to each other and you're getting to know them. And it's just like, just let there be some breathing room in the narrative in which they're just talking to each other. But the conversation gets a little heated, as it would given the circumstances. And so they start to kind of raise their voices. And a buddy of mine read it, and he made the observation, like he was reading it and he was thinking to himself, like, zip it, be quiet. I didn't think of that when I was writing it, but he made the point, like, they know that a bounty hunter could at any moment be coming after them. Why are they making a ruckus? Wouldn't they want to lay low? I mean, they want to get away. Why would they want to draw attention to themselves with noise? That defies human instinct. It's the kind of thing where you're thinking about a million other things, like trying to make the dialogue realistic and like, how would I describe this? What's the best? Oh, I just used that word. I got to use another word. That it totally went over my head. Oh, wait a second. Probably this conversation would go differently given the circumstances in which it was happening. So that would be an example of fine tuning based on feedback. Just you don't think of everything, so you kind of need other people to spot stuff for you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like a puzzle. I always liken it to a puzzle where sometimes people walk up and they point out something so obvious and you're just like, oh yeah, that piece goes there. That makes total sense. But Absolutely. Sometimes you do need a writer's guild.
Yeah, man.
On board with.
Yeah, man. Yeah, dude. Characters. Is there anything else you want to cover with characters? Do you want to go ahead and like talk about what you're reading? I feel like we're.
There's a lot with character that we could dive into. I think I'll have more as I'm writing this book and just discovering more in the process. But there actually is a book that I'm currently reading that has blown my mind. I think you should read it. I think you would love it. It's very Michael Crichton-esque. And it's called Dark Matter. And I'll give you the quick premise. So I'm about 65% of the way through the book, and I know that percentage because I'm reading it on Kindle.
Okay.
And it's about a character who dogging on the multiverse and how it doesn't have stakes. Mm-hmm. Well, this is an example of a book where it has a multiverse, and there are incredibly high stakes. And essentially, a character gets kidnapped from his normal everyday life. That it's a great life, but he's asking himself in the back of his mind, what if? Like, what if I had leaned in and focused on my career and become this scientist like that I always wanted to be? Or what if my wife, what if I held her back from becoming this famous painter? And so he's kind of plagued by these questions. Well, he ends up getting mugged, kidnapped, and when he comes to, he's in a dark room and a hospital bed. He wakes up and there's this glass wall and people are looking through the wall at him and there's cheering and they're like, wow, you're back. And he has essentially entered a whole different world. And there's a ton there that a lot of details I'm not filling in, but he's in a new world, a new life where he is someone who has made a groundbreaking scientific discovery.
Yeah.
And it's a box that you and I are talking. So what if Discord shut off right now? So that is an alternate reality because we have thought it is therefore a possibility in a different world. And so it's this idea of infinite lives and potentials basically.
Yeah.
And
Multiverse,
he created a box, right, that can navigate it. And so the story is about him trying to get back to his family, into this normal everyday life that he was realizing he loves more than anything in the world. And it is mind-blowing. I mean, I'm a big sucker for action. It doesn't really have, he gets beat up a lot. He's not a Jason Bourne type of character, which I'm usually very drawn to. But my gosh, it's an incredible read. So I've been really digging that. I was reading it earlier today. And talk about character building. I mean, it's pretty amazing.
Well, just based on your synopsis, it sounds like the author was taking the right angle by making the stakes personal. That's the thing that
absolutely.
We always think with the movies is bigger is better, but really more personal is better. My favorite, officially anyway, my favorite MCU movie is Civil War.
Oh,
because it's got. I mean, I remember the climax, right? You get to that room full of these super soldiers, and you think, okay, there's gonna be a big fight with these super soldiers, and then they win, and none of them die. There's no stakes. We've seen this before, and that's not it. It's a total fake out. They get there, the super soldiers are dead, and then there's that twist.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a great twist, by the way, because it's not like an M. Night Shyamalan twist where it's and it was the air the whole time. What? Instead of that, it's very personal. It's well integrated into what we already know. And it was a very just natural detail to reveal that recontextualize that scene, going from, hey, we're here to fight together, to Iron Man being whoa. And most importantly, it's personal. It's personal. And I love that. So you're talking about the whole multiverse concept being used for a guy who just wants to get back to his family. That's awesome.
Right? He's not trying to take over the world. And by the way, I do want to rectify my earlier statement. I actually think I like Winter Soldier the best. So just let it be known. Let it be on the record.
Oh, Winter Soldier is so much fun. Yeah, I really love the personal stakes that are involved with Civil War. I mean, it's obviously a lot of fun too, but that final climatic fight, it's just it's personal. I love that it's personal. And that's really what the final lightsaber duel had right in The Return of the Jedi, was that there was those personal stakes. It's a battle between father and son, the son trying to win his father over, and his father's struggle with that, and then Palpatine's over there just going, hey. I just, that's personal. I like that. It. I like that. And I have struggled for a long time trying to find a way to do the same with my own story. And I found a way to do that with one of the characters. He went from having more generic motivations to having something more present and more personal. And it can be a little tricky to find something because, the first thoughts that are going to come to our mind are the ones that we've most abundantly seen
Yeah.
and those would be cliches. Um, it can be hard to try and think of something real. I think a good strategy for that, not that this was necessarily like the topic of the episode, but whatever. Conversations are organic; they kind of go where they go.
Oh yeah, we're all over.
I think a good way to I don't know if other people in the wider public would agree with me on this. I'd be curious to know other people's thoughts. But I have found a good way to counter cliches is, sometimes you do need to use a cliche as a template. Like, like we were talking about how sometimes to get past writer's block, you just need to write and just accept that this is not going to be making it into even just this draft. Like this is going to be bulldozed over, but right now I just need to get something down to have some sort of framework for this chapter. So sometimes it's perfectly fine to get a cliche down, but then you got to go and revisit it and you got to modify it. And when it comes to like, the world building, for example, in my book, there's a lot of Wild West influence. I love cowboys and Indians and all that. And so that has had a strong influence on my world building, even though it's a fictitious world. It's not literally like 1800s America, but the culture, for all intents and purposes, is reminiscent of that. And as such, my commitment to myself, as a consequence of natural interest, not like me trying to be better than anyone else, but like I'm not into spaghetti westerns personally. I've watched some that I like, but it's not a genre I really. Spaghetti westerns.
What does that mean? Like
that's just
stereotypical...
John Wayne, just the cowboy movies, the classics, that kind of stuff. The Hollywoodification of the Wild West. Mm-hmm. I didn't use that as a frame of reference for informing me and fleshing out character stories and whatnot. Instead, I'd be reading like, history books about real historical figures from that era of history. And every once in a while, and just the other day I got something like this. Every once in a while, I'll be reading something and it'll just hit me between the eyes. This horribly tragic story of this something that happened to somebody. Like there was one guy, I'm forgetting his name. Was it Wild Bill? I think it was Wild Bill. I think it was him. I could be misremembering because there was another guy who had a similar name and they lived at the same time, of course, but one was younger than the other. But anyway, this guy was an incredible shot, right? And he served he served as like a sheriff in a number of towns, that classic kind of format for spaghetti westerns where, it's this overrun lawless town. And then this guy shows up and he sets the place to order because he's the best shot. He was literally that guy because he was an incredible shot. But he gave up that work and he stopped shooting after like one day. Something happens and he has to show up with his irons and there's a firefight and he just had crazy good reflexes and somebody rushes up to him and he just puts a round of them just like that, but it was his friend. And he obviously was devastated by that and couldn't do it anymore. That's really heartbreaking. And reading something like that, it's the kind of stuff that people don't make up. That's something that really happened. And I just took little details of that and put it into a character's backstory. Because the reasoning being, I love that. The reasoning being like, okay, first and foremost, if I'm like copying details from real life, then it's going to like give the story, at least my theory anyway, is it's going to give the story a sense of added realism. And I mean, what better way than to embody that era of history that I want to capture in my story? I mean, I'm kind of repeating myself at this point. But like, yeah, like real tragedy, not the kind of contrived stuff, not the characters chasing after a MacGuffin, but the real stuff with real personal stakes where somebody makes a devastating mistake and then they have to live with that the rest of their life. I injected that into a character story. Actually, there's you remember the character Falco?
Yeah, of
Actually,
course.
I
What?
actually added something. So I've got a character in my story. His name is Falco, and he um he's like kind of my comedic relief character. I don't really want to go into details about him because it's better read than said, right?
Hmm.
But
Show
his
don't tell.
yeah, yeah. Um,
Yeah.
hey, touche, man. That was a really good example there. But his character, um, he, I don't know how much to say about it.
What you maybe you should dive into an example like.
Yeah. Well, okay. So his character basically is pretending. He's pretending to be someone he's not, and all throughout the story, people are like calling his bluff. Either people don't care and don't question it, or but there's like one character in particular who just like is convinced you're not who you say you are, because he sees Falco presenting himself as this amazing outlaw when really he's like a complete doofus, and he's just like that doesn't make sense, and it just infuriates him, and he wants to prove that Falco is a liar, but he doesn't know really what's going on there. And I mean, it's like the very end of the book where Falco confides to one person what's really going on there. And it's because he had something really tragic happen to him earlier in his life, just a few years past. And I took details. There was a soldier that served in the Union Army. He kept a really really great journal. I could actually share the name of the book. I don't have it on me right now. I'd have to like go digging for it for my Kindle reading history. But he actually was a really great writer, and he did some journals I didn't bother to read because some of them they write the way you would expect somebody to be writing when they're living that kind of life out in the field and they're just miserable all the time. He was actually a really, really great writer. It was very entertaining to read. He did a great job of giving details. Like there was one day that all the soldiers just like took their boots off and started chucking them at each other, and just had a big fight.
That's
And
amazing.
and some of the officers are like, "Hey, stop that!" And then they go to the commanding general, who's like in charge of the entire army there, and they're like, "Look at this mess," and the general just said, "Let them have their fun," and that was awesome.
I, yeah, don't you love too like the spirit of humanity where it's like, you know, they're in these horrible conditions in a civil war, and somebody thinks of throwing his boots at somebody else, and then suddenly you have this massive boot fight, and it's just like, where does that even come from? Like, how do humans just pull that out of,
Oh,
terrible conditions?
dude, it's really cool things like that. It's the kind of stuff you don't really think about when you're trying to write a story. It's natural for most. I'm speaking when I say you, I'm speaking generally of writers as a whole. They try to, and I'll use a movie as an example that just came to mind. They try to build they kind of meld the characters to the theme that story is about. And an example, instead of thinking, well, how would a human react in this situation? I would make that argument. So an example I would use is the film The Lone Survivor. I read the book that Marcus Luttrell wrote about his horrible experience on Murphy's Ridge. And I watched some of the movie. I didn't finish it because I just didn't find it engaging because after reading The Real Deal, this just felt like a Hollywoodification of that, which it was,
Wow.
which it could only be because it is a movie. But do you know details about that?
I've only watched the movie,
Yeah.
and I thought the movie was really powerful, but no, I have not read the book.
Well, the book's
I don't
very,
know the details.
very, very beautiful because I mean, it's his way of commemorating the lives of his friends. But like remember that scene in the movie? They run into these goat herders, and they have this dilemma of like, okay, we have been compromised. People know we're here now. We don't know the consequences of that. These guys obviously don't like us, but they're unarmed, and that we can't do that. We don't want to, get in trouble with our own country for killing unarmed men. So they let him go. And when they let him go, Mark Wahlberg kind of stands there, and the sun's behind him. And he's got his rifle, and he's all awesome. He's Navy SEAL. And he just sort of looks at them, and he's smoldering. Let's be real, he's smoldering, and he's just looking at the goat herders, and he's just staring. And it's like a moment where it's just, let's just feel the drama of this moment of like, oh, did we make the right decision? And I'm just thinking to myself, you know, if you were really there and they're leaving now, I would be thinking, oh, frick, we better like, we're relocating right now. I wouldn't stand there and like smolder, you know? It was a very Hollywood moment that kind of fit the mood of the scene, but I don't think was a authentic depiction of like what a well-trained Navy SEAL would do in that situation. I think if I remember correctly in the book, like, no, the response is like, we're moving. We gotta get somewhere else because they saw us. There's no stopping that. And they also know we're right here. So like, let's get somewhere else really quick. So that would be an example of that where, and I mean, the same thing happens to me. I was writing a chapter today where these characters are navigating through a place they're not familiar with, and they have to complete something very important. And everyone's stressed about it because they don't really know what's going to happen to them. And one of them is kind of at odds with the other. And he expresses his doubts, and the other starts to give his speech about how you need to trust me. I've already told you why. You need to listen to me. And I can already tell you when I wrote it today, I started thinking of, because I'm trying to think that way. I'm trying to think, okay, how would a person react? I was thinking, hold on. Some of the things that he's saying doesn't really seem that realistic. Like, why would he stop and give this entire speech when I already presented this sense of urgency to their task? Why would he give this speech right now? Doesn't really work. So I need to go back through and modify that, you know? So yeah, I think the goal of mimicking real life and using history as a reference for that is a really great thing. That's something I strongly encourage you to do, since I know the book you're working on is, you know, very strongly influenced by the Wild West. Dude, I'd say if you want to like really, you know, I think the best kind of Easter eggs you could put in your story would be historical ones, you know, where you leave little details here and there that are reminiscent of the real stuff. I think that's cool.
You know, it's interesting. It is kind of Wild West. It's like Wild West meets Victorian London.
Mm-hmm.
And so, because really the whole story happens inside of a city. And I actually did look up, I should read more books, like historical fiction or nonfiction, but yeah. I did look up this really cool, I vividly remember this. It was like the old sewer systems and stuff and how the sewers used to work. And
that's cool.
It was really interesting diving into that, you know, because I knew nothing about it. And I've seen it in certain movies, and the history of like the Thames River and all the issues they had with sanitation was actually pretty fascinating. So I drew from that, and it became a part of my story. But
that's so cool. I love that. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead, and if you're game, I'm gonna go ahead and dive to the final segment of the episode, and that's where we just like talk about what we're currently reading. I know you did mention a book already. Maybe that was actually your submission for that answer.
Yeah, that was my submission, is Dark Matter.
Dark Matter. Okay, so mine is, and I think you said you've read this before, Royal Assassin. That is the second book in a fantasy trilogy. A fantasy trilogy called the Farseer trilogy. The first book is called Assassin's Apprentice. I couldn't recommend it enough. It's so brilliant. I think the thing I love the most about it, I mean, first and foremost, the characters are great. To harp back on that topic, the characters are really, really great. The author, and this is kind of one of the advantages of a book, is that, you know, pacing, you can take your time with a book. The author allows the characters to breathe and exist in these kind of slow-paced, non-plot focused chapters where you're just getting to know the characters, and you can take your time like that, and it adds value to the story. There's great stuff like that, but the thing I especially love is the magic system. It's this psychic-based magic system that is so intuitive and has so much potential. It's called the skill, and basically people can can kind of like reach their minds out to one another. Much like, I can walk up to you and shake your hand, like on a psychic level, somebody could reach out to another and interact with them mentally. And the way the author describes those mechanics at play, it is, I don't know, it's kind of in the middle between, it's not really a soft magic system. Because when I think of like a soft magic system, I think of like Gandalf like blowing on a pine cone and now it's a pyrotechnic grenade. And there's no explanation. It's just that he's a wizard.
Freaking cool. He's
versus, a Brandon Sanderson book in which somebody's doing some basic trigonometry and now they can...
Right.
Now they're whipping up magic with that, and it's super technical and specific. It's not like that, but the rules are present and clear, and the consequences are consistent. But the potential is endless, and the effect and the impact is awesome. Like specifically, it's people playing mind games, but like with just their mind. Like a character. Is a driving plot, an overarching plot throughout the story, is that the kingdom is being raided by these ships from a foreign country, and they're basically Vikings. They come in their ships and they raid and pillage and then they leave. And one of the characters who has the skill, the way he's defending the kingdom is by like he sits in a tower and he looks out at the ocean and he like reaches out with his mind to these men in these boats and he tries to like trick them into thinking, actually our coast is over there, or actually yeah, we can go through that storm, we don't have to go around, and then they crash. But he has to do it like subtly, because if it's too obvious they'll catch on to the fact that somebody's manipulating them from afar. And it's just a really cool magic system. I really like it. It's the kind of thing where it's like, man, I wish I had thought of that first so that could just be my thing, because that's so cool. And then I look at my magic system and I'm like, I don't do that in my magic system. But like this book, the first book anyway, was published in 1995. I didn't exist then. So like, but it's really cool, man. I really, really like it. I know on the Discord we have, it was one of our members recommended the book. I think I remember who it was, but like I got to thank them for recommending it.
Abigail, right?
I think it was Nadiana. Is that her name?
Oh, was it Nadia?
I think it was.
Yeah, it might have been Nadia.
Nadiana. That, yeah, so good. Specifically, again, the characters are very believable, and the author really, Robin Hobb, really took her time to just flesh these characters out, and they're grounded, They're consistently grounded. Like their motivations always make sense. I'm never thinking to myself, why would that person do it? That's convenient for the plot. Like, no, they feel like people. And that's really what I love in storytelling. And that's something you can just aspire to express in books. Because, it's your own project. You can do it the way you want, So
that's the fun of it.
Yes, sir.
All right.
It is. Alrighty. Well, I think that's it. I mean, man, it's almost an hour.
Dude, crushed it.
Yeah, man.
This was good.
Yeah,
Episode
absolutely.
1, Writer's Guild.
Woo! Alrighty. Well, and the next episode, I will present the question, and you will present the topic, and we will ambush each other with that. So,
yeah,
that's it.
We try and take each other out with those. So,
alrighty, that's it. The end.